So a lot of times when people have been in a particular industry or anything like that for a really long time,
Yeah.
they have fixedness, meaning this is how we do it. This is how we do it here at Merchants, or this is how our industry does it. And oftentimes that fixedness actually works against you.
Yeah.
Now, some of that fixedness is great because that means you're an expert. But sometimes when you're like, no, we wouldn't do that. We haven't done that. We haven't tried it. It doesn't work. Well, it didn't work 5 years ago. The world changed over the last 5 years.
Yeah.
So what I saw is I saw an industry where there were about 10 companies in North America. Merchants was eighth, the eighth largest. And a lot of the companies were okay with 2 to 5% market growth.
Mhm.
And, I was scratching my head saying, that's fine, but, why can't you grow faster? But the mindset, first of all, was, well, that's just the industry. And I'm like, well, okay, well, you don't have to accept that that's the
Yeah.
industry. And at the time, it was a family owned business by four brothers that were really good entrepreneurs. And they had set up a number of companies internally. But what wound up happening is they never came together as one value proposition to the client.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you how I found out. I'm getting onboarded as a board member, and I used to be the company's largest client, and they're all telling me what they do. And I said to one person, I would have been your largest client of your division had I known about you. And they go, yeah, but you were a client of the other division. And
Oh,
I kind of
wow.
scratched my head and
Yeah.
said, well, you're making your customer actually understand your organization. So we collapsed 7 companies that run independently into one company and now offer all those services to our clients. And we've been able to dramatically grow company share. So it's a really unique opportunity where being a customer,
Mm.
set me up for success. But Julian, I'll tell you this, when I first started, I had some people very gently say to me, Ferdinand, are you a technology guy? What do you know about fleet?
Sure.
And, I was like, hey, you guys know about fleet. I know more about technology, but I'm going to try to bring new ideas and new innovation to the company. And in 2018, we were 500 million. So, pretty decent sized company.
Yeah.
And as we're starting to head into Q4 of 22, so 4.5 years later, we're 2.5 billion.
That's
So,
incredible.
quite a bit of growth. And here's the fascinating part about that. Everything we do today, the company had all these capabilities 5 years ago. So we haven't gone
Wow.
and acquired anything. We haven't gone and built new capabilities. We have taken our existing capabilities and targeted different markets,
Mhm.
and we are approaching it different ways.
How would you describe the consolidation of all those different businesses under Merchant Fleet at that time? It seems like, there's a lot of features, there's a lot of, different value propositions, right? But now then you consolidate it into one and then offer it to different segments, almost like you did before, but with a different approach. What was that consolidation process like? And how have you then used that approach to the different customers and service?
So what I'd say is when I first came in, that was part of my thesis in coming to the company was doing that. I would tell you about 40% of the people were fans of it. They said, this makes a lot of sense. About another 40% were, hey, let's wait, see. And 20% are like, this guy doesn't know anything about fleet. Why'd we hire him? It's a completely bad hire.
Yeah.
And they were right. I didn't know about fleet, but I was viewing it from a customer standpoint saying, I want one view into the company. I want you guys to come to me, tell me what I need if you're the
Mm.
expert. So now what I'd say is it really took us 12 to 18 months for us to get, because when you bring two organizations together, and by the way, in the process, no one lost any jobs or anything like that. But when you bring them together,
Yeah.
and let's say you're running the sales team in one department, and I'm running it in another, and we're supposed to now cross sell, here's my general response. Well, you go first. You
Yeah.
you bring me to your clients. And then you're like, no, you bring me to your clients.
Yeah.
So I mean, we experience things you see in kindergarten classes,
Yeah.
where, you're in the sandbox and you're
Right.
wrestling a little bit. And I'd say it took a full 12 to 18 months for everybody to really embrace it. And
Yeah.
once we started winning some accounts that we hadn't been able to win, once we had clients saying, wow, this is really unique. Thank you for this. All of a sudden people started coming on board. Again, you have 40% of people up front that came right on board because they said this makes sense. And then we just kept building up the momentum and building up the momentum. And then once you see that it's a winning strategy, everyone wants to be part of being a winner.
Yeah, yeah. It's so fascinating. You use the word thesis as when you were transitioning to this company. Is the thesis you brought in specific to Merchant Fleet, or is the thesis something that you've developed over time as someone who's grown and scaled companies?
Well, I would say yes to both of
Mm.
those. So, one of my general thesis as being a CEO is it's our job to explain who we are to the client so they don't have to understand it.
Yeah.
There's too many times like, hey, I'll get some non-solicited email today for somebody trying to sell me something, and I'll read through it. And at the end of it, I'll be like, I don't know what they do.
Yeah.
I don't know what they do.
Yeah.
You can improve my productivity. You can drop dollars to my bottom line. Okay, great. I don't know what you do.
Yeah.
And so the first thesis is you've got to be able to articulate your value, and you've got to consolidate your value so your client doesn't have to go to 4 different places to understand what you do. So that I brought to every company. What I would say is at this company, it's had more success than other companies I've had because where this was founder led, entrepreneurial led, family led,
Hmm.
its level of entrepreneurism was very high. And hence everything was kind of kept separate. And
Hmm.
in some cases, the actual businesses would compete with each other.
Yeah.
And, in that it can be healthy when you're trying to grow early, but later it becomes unhealthy when someone says, well, I don't want to share my client with them because, I want to grow faster than them. And
Right.
now it's all about, just remember, guys, it's one P&L. It's
Right.
one number for the year, but have to change incentives along the way as well.
Yeah. No, that's so fascinating, and changing the incentives, changing the structure of how the company functions to overall have this cohesive experience with everyone on the team. One thing that slipped my mind, but just came back in regards to the traction you mentioned. You were a $500 million company. Now you're at 2.5, ending the quarter here. So that's extremely exciting. What's been a part of that success, and where do you see the company in terms of its growth and its customer base? Where do you see it growing and expanding to?
Yeah. So when I got here, we had 4 different ways we made money, and
Mhm,
and I call those economic engines. So we had 4 economic engines that were firing.
mhm,
Today, 4.5 years later, we have 12 economic engines. So
mhm,
the one thing I always do is I say, how do you make money?
mhm.
And by the way, you'd be surprised how some companies don't really understand how they make money. They say, oh, we do X. And you're like, well, you do X, but you also provide service Y, and you've got a third way you make money. So we had 4 ways we made money. And then we said, well, could we start? So you have a business that does short-term leases of passenger vans. Yes. Could we do short-term leases of truck rentals, pickups? We think there's a big market for that. We could, but like we've never done that before. It's like, okay, you've never done that before. That's fine.
Yeah.
Do we know how to buy the vehicles? Do we know how to rent them? Do we know how to collect them? Do we have existing clients that have that need? Yes. So, give you for instance, 4 years later, we have 5,000 on short term lease now, and that didn't exist a couple of years back. So, but is that really? It's a new economic engine for us, but we knew how to do that. That's exactly what we do as a company. We're just targeting a different market. So we now have 12 economic engines. So we have 12 different ways we're making money.
Mhm,
And in any given time, you're going to have a few that are growing really well, some that are growing. And usually you're going to have 1 or 2 that are struggling.
mhm.
When you have 4 economic engines and 1 or 2 are struggling, you're probably not growing overall as a company. When you've got 12, and by the way, 8 of them are new, you all but can't help but grow.
Right.
Because, all of a sudden your 5th engine's growing, your 6th engine growing, and you're like, well, we didn't even have those engines last year. So it's almost automatic growth.
Yeah.
And so that's what we've done. But in building these 8 engines out, they're variations of what the company already did.
Mhm, mhm.
But it's just so we would do seasonal rentals of passenger vans. Great.
Yeah.
We used to do it for summer camps, right? Took kids around all North America.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. That's a relatively small market. We said,
Mhm.
if we can rent the van for 4 months and make money and make it disappear, why don't we why don't we go attack last mile and home delivery and
Mhm.
e-commerce?
Yeah.
Because there's hundreds of thousands of those. So in 2018, we did no last mile. We didn't do that. Today we have 22,000 vehicles doing home deliveries, last mile, and e-commerce across some of the biggest companies in the world. But that's gone from 0 to 22,000. But where did we learn how to do that? We learned it by doing it for summer camp for 30 years.
Yeah.
So if you think of what's the difference, we went from targeting a very small market
Mhm.
to targeting a very big market. That's essentially the only difference,
Yeah.
but yet tremendous success. So, it's how do you look at your capabilities as a company, and how do you focus those capabilities on the biggest opportunities?
Right.